You didn't rename it. And make sure the audio is off, which it is not. No, I don't got it. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Church AV Professional Forum, where we talk about our church business. Oh, no, well, I can't say that. Where we talk about the business of the church. We don't talk about our church business. So I am here with two of my co-hosts today, and we want to welcome Karel and Andrew.
How's it going, guys?
Greetings.
So how are you guys been doing?
It's been hot.
Just a little.
It's been busy.
Yes.
So is your area, Andrew, considered the Mid-Atlantic like ours is?
In West Virginia, we are considered, we're looked at as not here by everyone else. So, so we're Appalachia.
That's right.
We're considered Appalachia. So we're in the middle there. Sometimes we're connected to Kentucky,
yeah.
Tennessee, but we're Appalachia. So they don't like us to be considered East in the East, and they don't like us to be considered South in the South.
All right. Well, how about you, Karel? How are you doing?
Man, when has it not been a busy moment? That's all I gotta say. Life's been pretty hectic. A lot of moving parts and pieces, building heading back to work, church heading back into church. Business taking off. I mean, lots of different little things. And I'm just grateful to be able to sit down and actually kick back and relax with you guys and talk about some of the changes.
Well, as Colin would say if he were here, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll jump right into our topic for today. So, dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity. We're here to really talk about your business and how we can help the church move forward to reach as many people as possible by using technology. We know that it's just a tool, it is not the message. So continue to be with us. Hope that those who hear this will be blessed. Amen.
Man.
All right. So our topic for today is upgrading your church. Now, pre this conversation, Carell was mentioning that we're always in a state of upgrade. But that's not exactly true. We sometimes we find steady state. Technology does move so quickly that it always seems we're upgrading something. So I'm going to start with the first question to you guys. What is your regular upgrade cycle?
Is there a regular upgrade cycle?
That's a
I
more
mean-
fair question. Yeah.
I mean, the reality of the situation, I would say most of the time, I would say, especially in church, is that it's break fix mode. It breaks, we fix it. There's some things where if you do have regular maintenance schedules, then yeah, it'll work. But not every place is that consistent to that level. It's not a problem until it goes down, and then it becomes a major problem. It's unfortunate that we look at some things that way. There's definitely some lessons learned from a particular situation that I had to deal with at my church recently, that spoke to the essence of making sure you do regular maintenance. If you're going to use Dante, we'll just say that. So, when you're trying to address issues or like try to get ahead of the issues, it would behoove you to do it if you can do it. Get everything on a schedule, and then also in your daily, I think, pre-flight checks, whenever you're getting ready to use stuff, assume it's broken before you even put it to use to make sure that it's still solid. Some folks may not understand the value of that, but I mean, that saved me a couple headaches, or bad cable here or whatever. And, yeah, we used it last week, but it was limping by. We just didn't know,
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents on that.
That is the downside with break fix, in that a lot of times we're just band-aiding. So you slap a band-aid on it to get it through that day. You're worn out at the end of the day. You pack everything up, you go home. And next week, you forget about the band-aid you put on. You got to slap another band-aid. Yeah. So Andrew, now that IT is much more prevalent in churches, what is your upgrade cycle? Computers, I find it's fairly simple. Once the secretary says, my computer is slow, we get all new computers. But we're talking about infrastructure in this case. What is the upgrade cycle for infrastructure?
Well, I've been in a number of churches that were methodical about this. Like they treated the whole plant as something that you had to monitor, and hey, when do things come up for renewal, X, Y, and Z. Working in places like that, ministering in places like that was easy. Here, we're in a small church, and basically, I keep an eye on things. And as things break, or as something starts to get a little long in the tooth, we switch it out with something else. Here, like I said, here we're small, so we don't have an official budget for some of those items. I try and make sure that we have a little bit of money allocated for, hey, this thing is getting bad, or are we prepared to do such and such? But we have a small place, so I can get away with throwing in my equipment periodically to make things work.
Actually, I do that, and I'm in a much bigger church. But so on that same topic, Carell, there's something you said specifically about the break fix, where a lot of times nothing's addressed until something's broken. I remember I was there. I wasn't part of the AV team at the time, but I was there when the soundboard went out. And this is at least 8 years ago. So the soundboard went out in the middle of service. Oh yeah, the middle of service. And not just any old part, it's when the pastor was speaking. And not just, okay, the sound is going in and out. It was the and you couldn't find it. You couldn't, every mute button you tried, nothing worked. It turned out one of the XLR inputs, one of the input XLRs, the solder broke. And so what are the odds of something you don't really mess with? It just broke. So that was how that was addressed. And unfortunately, 8 years goes by and there's no upgrade, there's no thought to upgrade. Now, part of the problem with that is administrations change, leadership changes. We're all volunteers. How do we handle passing out, sort of keeping track of the age of these things and when they should be replaced? Whose responsibility is that?
I would
Somebody
say,
with very good organizational skills.
well, no, see, the responsibility to set that in motion is the responsibility of the person who is in charge at that time. It is the church's responsibility overall to make that happen on an ongoing basis, right? But the person, whoever, let's use an Old Testament metaphor, right? Whoever's the high priest is responsible for seeing that that whole thing works together. But all Israel is kind of interested in making sure that the priests rotate appropriately, right? Otherwise, you'll get some sort of chaos there. And I know that different churches have different operational structures, right? So I'm being careful not to impose any specific church or denomination or group's perspective on how it's done, because different churches have entirely different hierarchies in how those operate, and duration of leadership. But essentially, the church, whatever is the longest running body, legislative or executive body of the church, administrative body of the church, needs to care about that. And if they have to delegate that oversight to a specific committee or group, they need to do that. But it is the church's responsibility to make sure that that is being done somewhere by someone.
Mm. I didn't consider that. I mean, one of the downsides, I think, with churches is the amount of groups and committees that there are. But someone from finance really should be speaking to someone from the AV team, IT team constantly.
Yep.
Because there's the two most expensive parts of maintaining a church, doesn't matter if it's large or small, is AV and actual infrastructure.
Yeah, the plant, right? So
Yes.
the facility has the greatest cost, and then the technology has the second greatest cost.
So we got a question that came in real quick. How do we make sure teams communicate as people rotate in and out?
Right.
But that's, as Andrew said, that's a church infrastructure thing.
The church, and again, I have to be somewhat vague, unfortunately, because I know that we're talking to all churches, all kinds of groups, and some churches are congregational, some churches have larger district kind of configurations, but at some level within that structure, somebody is responsible for how the plant is operating. They care about the insurance. They care about, is the roof going to be leaking? They care about, are we paying for such and such, the mortgage, if it's already paid off? They care about whatever fire insurance and all those. They must care about the technology, if only because the technology, the repair of the technology, especially in a larger facility, is going to touch all of these other things, right?
Mhm.
You're going to be up in the ceilings and up in the rafters and drilling holes and pulling cable. So whoever's responsible for the ultimate plant, whatever group, committee, entity is responsible for that, they also need to know that someone else is handling that other thing. I'm not saying they have to be technically savvy, but they need to be aware, hey, I'm responsible for the road, and do you know water pipes go through here and electrical pipes go through here and whatever happens in the road. So I need to understand that these other things are there, is someone checking on them. Otherwise it will create problems if you have people up in the rafters every other week and it could have been better coordinated.
Mm. So financially then, now this is almost a pivot, but what do you tackle first? And as always, I have an example. We've let things go so long that everything is in sort of need of repair. And the plan that we created, it's really done in phases. But for us, the number one case is we have no speakers in the sanctuary. The speakers that were installed 15 years ago no longer work. So obviously, there is zero service you can have without speakers in the sanctuary.
Mhm.
So we understand that has to come first. But Corel, as you're going through and you're doing your assessment, Andrew, as you're going through and you're doing your assessment, what comes first for you to repair? What do you focus on first? Knowing very well that sometimes people think once you focus on this, oh, we're done.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I just had that conversation on Sunday with a committee, by the way, just so we know. The key thing for us is, right, obviously you've got to deal with whatever is going to help you to support the service internally first, right? I would say if it's basic operations to your basic functionality, you need to look at that first. So in your case, no speakers, no sound, right?
Yep.
In my case, no cameras, no iMac.
Okay.
Right. And so we have like a remote situation where we have a fellowship hall. Now we're not full to the capacity right now where we need the fellowship hall, but we don't have the cameras right now to be able to push the signal to that room. And then the reciprocal effect to that also is no cameras, no stream. And we have been pre-producing our services for the last, year and a half. And that is going to come to an end very shortly here, which means that we need to be able to get online fairly soon. Right. So for us, our real big issue right now is our cameras situation. Also followed up by the fact that I discovered that our internet speed is slow. So we're gonna have to look at the services and what happened with that. But the thing is as we're just doing the pre-flight checks, right? And you look at all the infrastructure, what's happening. I'll give you an example actually. So our audio board hadn't been used for a long while.
Oh, yeah.
We went into the church and went to fire it up. Nothing fired up.
Right.
What happened? Two little wires wiggled their way out of the Phoenix connector in the back of the power sequencer. I don't know how it happened. The board was used during COVID times when we were doing pre-tape stuff, but for whatever reason, it wouldn't. They came out, and nothing powered on. This was done the night before we were getting ready to have our first in-person reopening service.
Wow.
Right. And this is why you do those checks, because you need to figure out what's working and what's not. And we can't take it for granted that everything's just going to come on. That's right. So, thankfully we had our front of house technician there. Alex was also there and they worked through that. We were working through some issues with our video system that we needed to get rectified. So, it took all hands on deck to make sure that everything was going to function for the next day. But here was the next thing. Then we went to go play a video back and the audio was coming out crunchy. What? Well, one of the solder joints, funny enough, on one of the cables was not good. And so I had to go in with my soldering iron the next week and go reflow the solder and make the connection good again. And then that fixed the problem with that wire. But, these are things that, you go in and you find over time, but just the initial stuff first of figuring out what we needed to do was really important. And then that set the priority order for then what we needed to do next. Right. And then the other key thing I'm going to say is you need to make sure that when you go through these situations and scenarios that you make sure people know that, oh, one more thing. And oh, one more thing. This is the comprehensive situation of what we're dealing with. This will take care of the immediate need, but this is what's going to take care of the bigger things that we need to get to at the end. And these are the other things that, yes, we can get to those. They're not as critical, but they will need to be addressed. People need to be constantly reminded of that. And that needs to not only go to church administration, but to your finance board. or
Oh,
however the
definitely.
structure is, right?
Definitely,
Because
yeah,
it's not just about the leadership knowing, it's also about the people that make the financial decisions.
Mhm.
that's right.
The other thing to consider there is you need to let people understand the penalty for taking too long on certain decisions,
Mhm.
right? You're not trying to hold a gun to anybody's head, but you also you're doing them an injustice if you don't help them prioritize as well. So you need to say, hey, listen, we're going to need X number of dollars now to address this. We need an additional X by this time. If it's not done by this time, the likelihood is that it'll be X plus Y because of all of these factors, right? Meaning equipment might take too long to purchase. We'll no longer be able to get A with B. The A that we have won't go with the B that's there, or they'll stop selling B, and A and C aren't going to work. So we're going to have to buy C and D if you take too long to buy B, right? It's things like that that folks need to understand. Here's what it is. Over the time that I've had to manage technology at churches, one of the things that has been most helpful is, even though the church tends to operate in a 2-year budget cycle, 1 or 2 year budget cycle, I always plot out a 5 to 10-year budget cycle that just assumes, hey, assuming we make no other changes, here's what the maintenance looks like over this period. This amount needs to be allocated because the likelihood that these 4 or 5 things are going to break and people are going to say, aren't these under warranty? Sure, which means someone will look at it, right? But depending on where you are in that warranty process, the repair of it may not be free. It may just be subsidized, right? And so you have to let people know some things are going to break that aren't under warranty, but you expect them to break in that time and you have to replace them, some cables and stuff like that. So you have to let as many people know what's involved and what that looks like over time, because that helps to cut down on the, but I thought you told us everything last week. Yeah, but there's more time, right? You have to change the oil in your car, although that analogy doesn't work as well as you think, because you'd be amazed at how many people don't do what they're supposed to with car maintenance.
Another piece to sneak in there too is if you have maintenance contracts on anything that need renewal, that's a sneaky thing that can also sneak up on you. So you need to make sure that you're on top of that stuff too. Not as common necessarily with a lot of AV equipment, but I know when dealing with some network capable stuff, that can definitely creep in there.
Oh, yeah.
For stuff I've dealt with. And so, you just want to make sure you keep it up, because if it were to fall over at an inopportune time, and it's usually when that does happen, it's an inopportune time. Yep. Oh, our maintenance contract fell off yesterday. Oops.
Software licenses, it bites us. A lot of our churches use Planning Center. Great application. But you don't want to find out when you're going into program that your treasurer hasn't paid the bill and now you can't program, which really messes you up for the week because you've been preaching to everybody. We're using Planning Center. Make sure you look at Planning Center. Then you can't log in and all of a sudden you're scrambling around.
That's a good point to make when it comes to SaaS/cloud-based applications.
Oh yeah.
Things are on a subscription basis more often than not now.
Yep.
So it used to be that you bought a piece of software and ran it into the ground. And it's like when you finally go to update, it's like, oh, we haven't seen that version in 12 years. But now you're not going to really get that opportunity because whatever you're purchasing is going to be online. And the week after you stop paying, the day after you stop paying, access to that stuff is cut off.
Right. And the other thing is too, right? It's good to have the central clearinghouse for that stuff where all the licensing goes, right? And I usually try to make sure that goes through our treasury, mainly because if leadership, which it does, transitions hands, it's not tied to a person's email, it's not tied to a person individually. There are times where we have to do that out of necessity, like the pandemic was definitely one of those times where that kind of had to happen.
Yeah.
But usually try to make sure you go through the central clearinghouse for that kind of stuff. And if it's not set that way, then try to get it that way. Set up a generic email address can be transferable between people, as they transition in or out, and try to make sure that that the folks in your treasury staff or whoever is handling the money is also aware of licensing, when the expiration dates are, all those kinds of things, because you need to keep up current credit card information, all this other stuff that needs to be dealt with. Or they may even choose to use a check or whatever they're going to do. But the point is you need to have those discussions, because too many times we'll sit there and say, oh, well, we need Microsoft Office or something similar, right? And we'll just go maybe pick up the cloud version. And the thing is, a lot of times churches don't always look at themselves as small businesses, and they are.
Yep.
So you could leverage your buying power by getting a group of licenses for a cheaper rate than buying a bunch of individual ones for different computers that you're just going to forget about. So it's prudent financial management too on the maintenance end, just to kind of highlight that stuff.
That's right. So there's something that it may be difficult to talk about in the next 20 minutes, but I want opinions more so than facts. When it comes time to pick, and let's just choose, let's see, Corel, you're an audio engineer, but you're dealing with a lot of video. Andrew, you're an IT person, but you dabble in both areas very much so, especially since there's all this convergence. And I am technically more of a video guy. So we can sort of cover all the bases. When it comes time for you to pick a piece of equipment for the church, and we're not talking about a $500 piece of equipment. We're talking about $20, $30, $50, $60,000 piece of equipment. How do you decide what's the right one for the church? What method do you use to decide what's the right piece of equipment for your church?
Okay, I'll go on this one. I do it the same way that I would do it from a corporate standpoint, right? It's not my money directly. In fact, in the church, it's a little closer to being my money than it is in a business. But I use the same class of evaluation. We've been in churches where people want to do the whole 3 bidding thing, and I'm like, guys, y'all don't want to play in this space, this enterprise space, right? Y'all don't have months to be making these decisions and teams of people to look at it. But what the key thing is, I take it seriously, and I communicate to the church I'm taking it seriously. I'm going to pick the thing that's the best product for the needs of the church, because I understand both what the church needs and I understand the technology. Right. And if the church wants to throw together, and sometimes when the dollar value is big enough, when you get into those 5 digits, sometimes they'll put together a select committee of people, if your church is big enough, who are in technology, so that it can be kind of a committee decision. Right. But if the decision is left to me, I'm going to pick the tool that suits the needs of the church, that gets that right balance between, has a good cost, so I can justify we're not just spending money for money's sake. But at the same time, I'm not going for the cheapest thing because I was trying to save money. Like, I want the church to get the value of whatever the solution is. And people should look back on that solution and think fondly that I was involved in making it, right? That's, not people pleasing exactly, but I take it professionally, and I take it as though I'm making the decision on God's behalf. Like, God says, hey, pick me out some technology. Okay, I'm going to pick the technology that God is going to be pleased about and is going to work for the mission of the church.
Right. I mean, it's the same process for me, right? I treat it as if it's my job, and ironically, we're in one sense, I'm dealing with offering that's given, and then on the other sense, I'm dealing with the tithe money that's given that goes up to the higher levels.
Right.
But it comes from the same source, the local church, and the truth of the matter is right, you got to get the right tool for the job. But then the other thing you got to look at is, what is my 5-year to 10-year plan for what I want this stuff to do when it depreciates, right? So if my church is currently operating and we barely have touched 48 channels of audio, I'm not going to go buy a 48 channel audio board. I'm just not going to do it.
You got to get 64.
You got to go 64.
You got to expand it.
Or go a little bit higher, right? Because the reality of the situation is yeah, right now we're not at that point. But what happens when you get a new administration that has a different vision, and now they want to have a capability that's going to require the higher audio count or the higher camera count? you have to think of these things when you're making these plans, because if you leave yourself pigeonholed into the little tiny box where we're living right now, that may work for you for 2-3 years. But when you need the extra capacity, it's not baked in,
Mhm.
right? And then you got to think forward and ahead with what you're going to do with infrastructure. And by that, I mean, you know, hey, we wired our church to do a Dante setup. We have 26 network drops throughout the entire church in the different areas where we do and support audio all around that church. Our fellowship hall, our band pit, both sides of the stage, at the wall plates, at front of house, in our broadcast audio room and the video room. All of them have been primed and ready to go for digital audio. Right. And I could have easily just said, okay, well, we'll pull one wire here, pull another one over here. Here's the key, though. Wire is cheap. Labor is not.
Not, yeah.
Pull the capacity.
Yep.
Go beyond what you think you need. So why did I pull 26? Well, on our wall plates, we have 3 network connections each on either side of the stage. And that's just the primaries. We have another 3 for the secondaries of those primaries. So you have A and A prime, or A prime and A whatever you want to use, and B and B and C and C. The thing is, we may repurpose some of them to be network connections, right? For whatever we need to do for data. But we're there. If somebody broke off an end right into the wall jack right before service starts,
Which could happen.
we just unplug, plug into the secondary slot, and keep it moving as if nothing happened.
Right.
Right. But it takes pre-planning, intentionality, and then also thinking further ahead beyond where you are right now.
And that's important because we're not talking cheap equipment on short timelines, right? If you're going to spend $5,000 and you expect it to last 18 months, then you just get what you need and don't overdo it, overthink it. And then the next cycle, you know, if someone develops a need at the 13th month, you're like, in 3 months we're gonna get the next thing, just hold out, right? But when you're putting something in that you expect will last 5 years and will probably sit there for 10, you need to be able to handle the 10, because the interesting thing about how people think is no one will remember the 7 years of plenty when the second year of famine shows up, right? They're going to be like, oh, what were we thinking when we did this? It's like, hold on, you got 7 great years out of this stuff. It did so much for you. Just because we started thinking of new things and everything changed in the last year doesn't mean you have to throw the previous years in the trash. So you do have to be flexible enough. And yeah, there's a cost to that, but there is a greater cost to not doing it, right? There's a greater cost to not doing it. I mean, just think about people who say 7 years ago, 6 years ago, put Cat 6 cable in everywhere. They're in a much better place right now than the people who had Cat 5 and now absolutely have to rip it out and replace it because you can't do 10 gig or anything else approaching that.
And you probably can't even do what I did.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, well, now we're talking about Cat 7 or even fiber. I mean, if you run fiber, but that I think is the thing about technology. In the video realm, what cameras do you pick? Because the glut of different cameras that have come out in the past 2 years, even during just this last year, every manufacturer released at least 2 different cameras. And so now you're looking, if you want to go cinema, you want to have everything look like cinema, which is so much more difficult for a non-technical person to deal with. You know, we make it seem like, the picture will look better, not if it's out of focus. I don't care if your whole picture is bokeh, you don't have a picture. So the idea that let's just give DSLRs to our volunteers. Oh no, that doesn't work properly. But do you spend the $15,000 on a broadcast camera because you know your lighting isn't good? Or do you say, okay, give me $100,000 to fix the lighting, then I could buy $6,000 cameras instead of $10,000. Everything works in such a way that it's very difficult for you to just say, this camera will solve the problem. And sometimes that's what they're asking you.
Yep.
Will this, if we give you this money, will we have a problem? Because we've all heard it before. Didn't we just buy such and such 5 years ago? Why do we have a problem today? I think that's what you were just saying, Andrew. Why are we having this problem?
You know how I solved that problem? Are you using the phone that you bought 5 years ago? Would you
Well,
like
you're
it
using the
back?
car that you had 5
Right?
years ago.
No, but no. The car, you know, I like to stay as close as possible with the
It's a
analogies.
technology. Yeah.
It's a technology. So remember the phone you had 5 years ago, and remember how it would behave if you were trying to do everything you do with your current phone. Okay, now that we are on the same page, right? Multiply that scale by a factor of say 3 or 4, and now let's talk, right? I had to do this because I focused within IT, I focused on security for a long time. And people are always asking you, okay, fine. So if I buy that, will I be safe? And I'm like, listen, we're not having that discussion, right? There's no such thing. This is a moving target. And I'm just coming today for you to pay for today's fee, right? Today's fee of the moving target. That's like saying, hey, if I hire these bodyguards today, will I be safe until I'm 100? Probably not, right? You might need to hire them some more. Again, they might have to get trained. So it's important for us, even though it's a painful process, to educate our churches and the folks that we're dealing with on the idea that this is a continuum of operation. There is no, will this solve all of my problems? It will solve whatever problems you believe you have today for about the amount of time that today will last.
Well, one of the things that we do definitely have to look to, and I'm going back to cameras, is because the technology is so varied and there's so many different kinds of cameras. You have PTZs, you have cameras on robotic heads, you have stand-up cameras. I go back and forth with my communications director because he would like more stand-up cameras. They do look better, you can get better movement out of them. But the one thing that they require that you cannot just manufacture is people. So we're going to have to talk one of these days about how to build up your teams. Like you said, each church is different. Each neighborhood is different. How do you build up your teams with dedicated people? But back to the upgrade, and I think there's an actual answer for that. But back to the upgrade. What can we do? You know what? There's a question that came in. Let me pull it up. The question is, whose input do you use to determine what's important? Just the leaders, team members, or pastors?
Well, who are the leaders if not the pastors? Which leaders are we discussing?
Each church is different.
Oh, no, that's true. That's true. But what kind of leaders? Are we talking about like department leaders, ministry leaders?
I'm going to assume that that's the way that the question is leaning.
Okay.
Yes, most likely department or ministry leaders, especially within your group, because AV teams are usually broken down by, you know, you have your big leader, but then you have your video guys, your audio guys, your presentation guys, your stage managers. Everyone has sort of a different role.
As opposed to being departments within the church leaders.
Yeah, because in truth, who am I going to ask? If we have an electrician who's a department leader, I'll definitely talk to him.
Okay.
But I'm not going to open up our equipment purchases to everyone. I'm not even going to pick a department because, you know, you might hear back from somebody.
What's
Why
the
are you
question?
leaving me
Yeah,
out?
exactly. What's the question again? Let me
The
hear.
question is, whose opinions do you take? Who's when it's time to make a decision, who do you bring together?
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha. Well, I think that to make a purchase, the question is interesting. Here's how I'll say it. I'll try to be comprehensive in the answer without consuming too much time. There are different constituents in this whole thing. People that are going to be using the technology, people are going to be benefiting directly from the technology, people who would like it to accomplish something, you know, the pastor or whoever's presenting they wanted to be able to accomplish. They have in mind, what they want to accomplish, right? And so they have some expectations. I don't know. I would take input from them, not so much about the equipment to obtain, but the specifications the equipment should address,
Mhm.
right? So the whole thing about, is it going to be cinematic or not? Those kinds of, someone is going to say, you know what, it would be great if we could do this, right? And sometimes they say it more like, my friend at that other church does it like that, but whatever,
always say that.
whichever,
They always say
whichever
that.
way. So there's input from people who expect functionality. There are input from people who need to manage it. Their input from the people who need to lead that or deal with the ramifications of, okay, great, so we got this type of technology, but now I need X number of persons to help to do whatever. So you take input from all of those people, and whatever the dynamics of your particular church, you'll have to weigh them, right? Because in some places the pastor is, that guy's Moses, right? And in other places, he's going to be someone who doesn't have the same kind of clout. And so you have to weigh those factors, but you take input from everybody. Their input just will have to weigh differently depending on their knowledge, their skill, and what they're bringing to the table, whether it's specifications or product knowledge and experience.
Okay, before I go to you, Karel, before you say yours, I do want to point out, I have a good friend whose comment always was, we need a one-button solution up front. Now, I'd always tell him there's no such thing as a one-button solution, but he said, I want to be able to, someone has got to be able to plug in, push one button, and they can do their presentation. We all know that that's fantasy, but we should have tried to get as close to that as possible. It would have saved a whole lot of pain. And so I do see what you're talking about people's input.
Well, okay, go ahead, Carl. I don't want to eat up all the time because I had a comment on that.
Well, go ahead, man. I mean, look, this is dynamic. So
the one button thing, so you can actually get close to the one button thing if you get everybody on board, right? Because for the one button thing to work, education needs to be involved too. Because I've seen people mess up one button solutions. They don't plug in the right thing. No, I've seen it. You have something like the easy button and they have it upside down. You're like, how did you do that? Like, it's not even possible. So
And I will say this, the industry has not helped us in any way when it comes to that.
That's not
There's
the goal of
too
industry.
many connectors right now.
Yeah.
We buy, Extron plates. Maybe that's too broad a term. We buy input plates. Imagine if you had to have an input plate with you have to have a lightning input, USB-C, USB-A, USB mini, USB-B, and then HDMI, XLR, the amount of inputs, and it's much easier to standardize than they're doing. And that is definitely an industry problem. DisplayPort. Heaven forbid there's just one, I miss VGA. Everybody uses VGA.
Well, yes, but you see, the reason for that is there wasn't innovation in all of the places, right? Right now, before, everything came out from the computer side.
Mm-hmm.
And because the manufacturers were making these things that way, when you were getting into something that touched their stuff, you made sure it could fit their stuff. But now when you can get together and put a patent and do something that's better for you, and you can introduce it, then somebody over there, the TV guy now has to account for the USB connectors and the HDMI connectors and the other kind of connectors. And oh, look, the small USB and the small HDMI. So we have innovation in 50 places because everybody wants to have their source of income and they want to have the easiest thing for them, even though we live in a converged world. That's why we have what we have now.
All I'm going to say is, based on this conversation, I miss the headphone jack. Okay.
Listen.
I do. Look, I had an event last week. Somebody handed me, here's my iPad. I said, okay, cool. Wait, there's no headphone jack here. What do I do with this? And literally, I didn't have time to deal with it because it was at the nth hour where I got that device.
Yep.
I'm going to have to look for the adapter that now works for that, because I've got the lightning one that goes to the thing that works with my telephone,
Right.
but I don't have the thing that works with the iPad, because the iPad I think is USB-C.
Oh, the newer ones, right.
Right. And see, this is the thing. As innovations come, like, you can try to be as prepared as you want to be, and there's always going to be that situation where something like this is going to bite you. And
Yep.
it bit me.
Yep.
And as much as I try to be prepared about every single situation, because then I had another situation this Sunday where I was handed a laptop, and I needed to get said laptop into said projector, but was not handed said adapter, which I believe is the responsibility of owner of laptop. But that's a
right.
whole nother ball of wax.
Yep.
Lucky for them, I keep a bag of adapters right in my bag, and I was able to get to the right one that was necessary. But,
I haven't been able to keep up, honestly. When it comes to
It's tough.
adapters, I have not been. There's just so many out there, and you never know what people have, and then our inputs are so old. Yes, VGA is impractical on an iPad. I understand that. It's just not going to work. But if we could standardize and then move quickly to that standard, and I know there's so much behind who's paying for the patent to use this, and well, I'm just going to develop my own because yours doesn't support this level, or I have to wait for version 2 point whatever, and then there's HDCP that you got. Okay, it's just it's too much. So as we wrap up now, because we promised to sort of be shorter. What do you guys think moving forward? Going in, one of the toughest things our church members had to realize is the fact that the equipment was off for a year was actually worse than if we were using it every week.
How the
So
human body works too. People don't realize that.
if you just lay down for a year and then
Mhm.
try to get up and run a quarter mile.
Try to get up. Forget the quarter mile. You're not getting up.
So just give me some key points. Let's just try to take like 4 minutes. Give me some key points of upgrading your facilities.
Man, well, first things first, take inventory. That's number one. Number two, figure out what's functioning and what's broken. Okay. Number three, what do we need to send out for repair and or do some in-field work on? A little different from some of the other things I just mentioned. The next thing after that, and after you do those assessments, is then, okay, what do we need to use and what can we do without? Because there might be something you need more immediate than you need later, because you may just be using your setup to do this for right now, but then we will be getting to this package that we offer later, right? And then you just work your way through the steps of trying to make those fixes or those upgrades as time allots or as the finances allot. Because another key thing to get back actually to the previous question you had that's kind of important is you have vision that's usually set by somebody, and then that vision comes with a cost. Okay. And then you fit the equipment choices into that budget. I never, ever try to come up with a solution and then fit it into, or then have them try to fit their vision into it. Why? I could easily spec $1 million system, easily, but they'll never be able to afford it. So I always try to push to have the powers that be work from a financial standpoint and a vision standpoint so that we can hit the target with what we need to do with the tech.
Good answer. Good answer. Andrew?
I agree with what has been stated here. I think it's inventory is essential. You have to understand what are the objectives that the organization, that the church is in at a particular time. More than that, you have to be able to communicate. Whoever's doing the inventory and the assessment, well, it doesn't have to be whoever, but once that information is available, somebody has to be able to communicate to folks, guys, this is where we are right now. This is what our capabilities are right now based on that. this is what it would take us to get back to this level. This would take back to get us to this level, right? So, and then that kind of sets the priority unless somebody else says, no, I need to do this first, or this is more important. But you have to be able to say, okay, we have 10 pieces of equipment or 100 pieces of equipment, and 50 of them are working. And the 50 that are working lead to these types of capabilities, right? So you're not gonna be able to do X, Y, and Z, just letting you know, unless you twist the arm of the treasurer to do X, Y, and Z. So that has to be communicated, and then folks need to understand what that means. That has to be shared with everyone, so that you don't get but can't we do such and such? Are you sure we aren't going to be able to do such and such? I heard that, right? You got to squash all of those kinds of things so that's all dealt with at one time. And then as you move forward, that's the way that you have to look at things. And, to add to that whole thing about working with Treasury, when you put the plan together and you say, okay, based on what you guys told us you want to accomplish, and me assuming, even 10% more than that, here's what the technology is that will do these things and should do it for this amount of time. And here's what it'll cost. If you do $2,000 more, you can get here comfortably, or to get to the next tier is $40,000 more. Like you need to let them know, because they may make the $2,000 decision. They may make the $10,000 decision, right? Don't not do it. And then they come back to you 6 months later and say, oh, we want to do that. Too bad. You wish you told me that before. Because no, do that. Communicate those kinds of things so people understand the threshold that they want to reach and what compromises they're willing to make to get there.
And, to that point, real quick, I tend to make a Cadillac list, an Acura list, and your, Hyundai list, right? So they all get you to your objective, and they can even see the bigger vision of what you do if you had full money budget to play with. But they also can see the reality of where you are. And then by that, then you can kind of whittle down what decisions you need to make. So getting back to the question about who all's in this decision, well, that's your answer. You've got the people that are putting in the tech, the people that have to run it, the people that manage the entire thing or the overall vision, the people that are actually setting the stuff in motion for the content to be created, in terms of like your leadership or whoever, the pastors in this case, and then the people that actually need to pay for that stuff. Everybody needs to have the idea and the mission understanding of where you're trying to go and how you need to get there and how much it's going to cost and what it will cost you to maintain and then eventually replace.
Yep. Those are all great answers. And I hope as everyone's listening that we take this to heart, that we start to think 3, 5, 10 years down the road so that we can help if you can hear a phone ringing, I can't help with that. But we really need to start thinking down the road, get the people involved who are part of the process. That involves your treasurers, your church leadership, pastors, get them all involved, because we see things from a technology standpoint, especially if you do this professionally, you see roadmaps. I was on a call, Sony is doing a presentation for it was today and tomorrow, well, depending on when you're watching this. Sony was doing a presentation at the end of July, and someone got on there and said, everything should be wireless. That is absurd. And it would never work. But at least we would know the roadmap because we attend these things. So you can't expect that you're going to go to your administration and say, I need 150,000. And they say, oh, okay, here, let me count that out for you. Go. What do you need that for? That's not going to happen. You need to have a reason why you're doing it. Even if it's just because it's going to fail, that is a reason. You need to have a reason why you're doing it, and you need to be able to present those reasons. Look, you could always reach out to us as soon as I get our email information on in the chat. I'll do that one day, not just the chat, but on the webpage. I'll do that one of these days. But you could reach out to us so that if there's anything we can help you with, we're happy to help you. Advice is free, consultation is not. So just think about get your questions out there. We can help you. We can all work together to really solve some of these problems. And we can help improve our churches to the point where we're spreading the gospel in a much more efficient, much easier way. I mean, that is the point. It's not just about playing with the toys, it's really about spreading the gospel. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank Karel. Thanks for Andrew. Hopefully the other guys will be back next time. And we pray that this was a blessing to you. Let us know if it was, and let us know if there's any topics you want us to cover, anything specific. We can get deep into hardware. So let us know if there's something specific you'd like us to check out. All right. Thanks, and we'll catch you the next time. Your mother knows I was recording something tonight. That's the only reason I didn't answer the phone before.